Hello, and welcome to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We're continuing on our series of Qatsyr harvests, primarily because today is one of those harvests. This is Shabuah. We are celebrating the final Shabuah prior to the fulfillment of this Moed Mikre. For those who may not know, there are 7 Moed Mikre. Moed means restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony regarding the appointments. And Mikre is an invitation to be called out and meet. So they are Moed Mikre. There are 7 of them. They were established by Yahweh. They're conveyed in his Torah teaching. They are not Jewish holidays. In fact, the Jews have done everything they can through Judaism to screw all of them up and don't have any one of them right. Of these 7 Moed Mikre, all of them have a dress rehearsal, if you will. There is a time where Yahweh weaves into the historic plot a way of forecasting what each of these ultimately mean in the life of his people. They're all then delineated in great detail, not once, but twice within his Torah, the first time being in Korah, which has been renamed Leviticus. And then each of them have a time when they are fulfilled. So let's just go through this by way of example. With Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, we have 2 dress rehearsals for Pesach, and we have 1 dress rehearsal for Matzah and Bikurim. The first dress rehearsal for Pesach, Passover, is when Abraham and Yishak, his son, climb Mount Moriah on Passover to celebrate the purpose of that sacrifice, which is to enable the covenant's benefits. And while they're there, Yahweh says, don't take the life of your son. I'm going to provide the lamb. In other words, that lamb will be my son. There's only one person that Yahweh refers to as his son. His firstborn is Dod, David. And it's not coincidental that Dod, David, wrote extensively about his fulfillment of Passover. He even described that he would be crucified on Passover 1,000 years in advance and 700 years before the Romans invented the form of torture that Dode vividly described in his 22nd Mizmor. So yes, the person who was crucified in 33 CE on Passover was King Dode in his second of 3 lives, not Jesus, because Jesus is nothing but a myth. The dress rehearsal, second dress rehearsal for Passover, but for Matzah and Bikurim as well, took place during the beginning of the Exodus. On the first night, while the children of Israel stayed in their homes, which means that Pesach has nothing to do with freedom, it has to do with life, Yahweh told them how to capitalize upon Pesach with the lamb. And they did so, and their sons were spared, providing life. Pesach is about extending life. And it's about the firstborn, which in Yahweh's case, his firstborn, Bakor, is Dod David by his own admission. Matzah is the time that the children of Israel were freed from religious and political corruption, the abuse that they suffered at the hands of the Mitzri, Egyptians. And so they were freed from these things on Matzah, which is to indicate to us that it is on Matzah that our souls are liberated from political and religious guilt. And this is because in 33 CE, Dod David, just as he described in his own Psalms, carried our guilt with him on his soul into Sheol, the place of separation, to deposit it there, never to be seen again, thereby perfecting us. Dod would go on to fulfill Bikurim, firstborn children, which is symbolically portrayed by crossing through the waters of the parted sea, as a child is born in the outflowing of water from its mother when the water breaks. This then led to a hinted at, but not officially declared, dress rehearsal for Shabuah, which is sevens, when Barishith was delivered as the first book of the Torah to Moshe and the children of Israel. These are the dress rehearsals, if you will, for Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, and Shabuah. There is also a fulfillment of each of these dates, and they are, as Dode proclaimed. In fact, Dode, in his communication as Gabriel, God's most courageous and capable man, told Daniel that he would arrive in Israel, in Yehudah, in Jerusalem, to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, Chag Matzah, as Yahweh refers to it, because Pesach is simply the first day of Matzah. Pesach is not a 7-day holiday as it's celebrated by the rabbis. They ignore Matzah entirely, and yet Matzah is the most important day because that's the day we are perfected and our guilt is removed. Anyway, Dode explained exactly how he was going to fulfill it, with his body suffering as the lamb, Bashar, and his soul, his nefesh, carrying our guilt into Sheol on Matzah so that he could be the Bekor, firstborn, in celebration of firstborn children. He did so in 33 CE, which is year 4000 Yah, actually on the specific day that he said he was going to arrive, 700 years in advance. That is the fulfillment of the first 3 Moed Mikre. The 4th Moed Mikre will be fulfilled in the next year. We are now celebrating the last Shabuah prior to its fulfillment. The fulfillment occurs exactly 7 years prior to Dode's return. That is why it's called sevens. And it will be fulfilled on the Shabbat, because it is 7 Shabbats. The Shabbat here being the Shabbat of the 22nd of May, 2026, which is exactly 7 years from Dode's return with Yahweh. This will be the fulfillment of it. And in this fulfillment, the responsibility has been handed to Dode's Bashar, Herald, who is acting as the final Zeroah, the one cultivating this harvest. The next Moed Mikre to be filled after Shabuah is, of course, Teruah. This is also a difficult one for Jews because they have screwed this one up absolutely every possible way and no longer even recognize Teruah, which is the day of the herald, but instead observe the Babylonian New Year, which is Rosh Hashanah. On this day, as the sun sets at the beginning of Teruah, will be the final gleaning of God's people. They will be the result of what Yada and Elia achieve during the final 3.5 years to bring additional Jews into the covenant family, and they will be whisked away from the earth into Shamaim. The following morning, the remnant of Yisrael who have survived the time of Jacob's troubles, which extends from Shabuah to Teruah over the course of 7 years, will be gathered in Jerusalem, and all of those who have not returned to Jerusalem during this 7-year period, they are going to be gathered into one of 2 chariots by Yahweh, black or white. And the black will be the extermination, the end of their lives for the religious and the political, and for those who are still rebellious against Yahweh. And the white will be for those who are receptive to the benefits of what's known as the Adamah Parah, or the red heifer, who will be sacrificed on Teruah to the backdrop of a full solar eclipse on the 24th of September, 2033, which is year 6000 Yah. Elia the one who served as master of ceremonies over the great religious and political debate where he condemned the religious and political within Israel, while orchestrating the sacrifice of the bull 2,888 years prior to this event, has been brought back for this exact purpose. He will serve as the master of ceremony for the sacrifice of the red heifer, the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth, who is so productive. Yahweh will do the honors in releasing the water and igniting the flames. Over that period, all enemies of Israel who have come to destroy Israel, that will be all the Muslim jihadists, that will be all of the Marxists who are aiding and abetting them, that will be all of the Christians who decided that they're going to have one last crusade, will all be obliterated by these searing flames, while Yahweh's remnant will be purged by them. And 10 days later, Yahweh and Dod return. There is copious amounts of prophecies, many, that explain that Dod is returning with Yahweh. That means there is no second coming of Jesus because there wasn't even a first coming of Jesus. Jesus is nothing but a product of identity theft and counterfeit. He never existed. Dod is the Messiah and the Son of God, according to God, who came to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and who is returning to fulfill Yom Kippurim. 5 days thereafter, we enter the grand celebration of Sukkah. We camp out with God for 1,000 years as the earth is returned to the conditions found in Eden, meaning there will be no religion and no politics. That is the fulfillment of the rest of the Moed Mikre. So I have given you the timeline that you can use to ascertain where you are and how you want to respond, even giving you the purpose of each of these days so that you might capitalize upon them. Today, we are completing our celebration of Shabuah, and this is why we've returned to present Qatsyr Harvest, which is volume 5 of the Yada Yahowah series. You'll find all of the evidence for everything I'm saying, verifiable proof within the books presented at YadaYah.com. This, as I've said, is Qatsyr Harvest, Volume 5 of the Yada Yahowah series. So since Yahweh agreed not to talk directly to his people, again, not until they return to him, which will not occur until year 2033. And this was per their request. They told God to shut up and go away. They didn't want to hear from him again during the Exodus. He has now chosen his choder, Nachri, and Bashar, Yada, to serve as the final Zeroah, to deliver these instructions. Quite frankly, God didn't want to have to suffer the indignity of having to reintroduce himself to you after how poorly you treated him the last time. And that's why he has delegated this responsibility to me. Now, it's not like he's saying, okay, kid, you do the introduction so that when they change, I can return. He's all in with this. He has given his choder the seventh Ruach of Yahweh to enable this. And we have worked at this now already 24 years, developing this vast reservoir of knowledge that sits in these books that you can see behind me. And it is the reason that after writing all of the books and being the first to come to have an appreciation of the entire portrait that God was painting of himself and of his people, that after doing so and presenting that to you, God said, now I want you to speak as if you were the books. You've written plenty. It's time to talk. And that is the purpose of the Yahowah blog. So God's perspective on all of this is that he is doing as he has always done. He has chosen someone through whom he will communicate to his people. After all, in Hosea, he was kind enough to provide even the web address as to where you would find these truths. Now, this takes us to a preeminent event. Behold, a time is coming, Yahweh reveals, well in advance of it occurring, I will enter into and cut with the house of Israel and with the family of Yehudah, a restoring and renewing, repaired and affirmed covenant. Yirmiah 31:31, and there was crashing. Maybe you didn't see it, but off the side of the screen, that was the obliteration of the Christian religion. And the one statement that they claim gives them credibility for their New Testament, their new covenant, God just gave them a torpedo amidship. This renewal with the covenant, I'm sorry, but it ain't with goys, it ain't with the church. God is continuing to reach out to his people, the house of Israel and the family of Yehudah. And these are the very people that the Christian New Testament blames for killing their imaginary gods so that they could demean and dehumanize them, so that they could rob every Jew of their promises, claiming that every one of those promises that God made to those dastardly Jews who killed our God now are suddenly ours. Well, God says exactly the opposite, just as he did here. When he renews and restores, repairs and reaffirms his one and only covenant, Bereth, it's going to be with Israel and the family of Yehudah, and not any goddamn church. Today on X, I had an egotistical Roman Catholic that wanted to explain in erudite terms why he was supportive of Israel, and his argument was lame. And I just wrote him back and said, well, then can you explain why the Roman Catholic Church has been so anti-Semitic over the years, why it has persecuted and subjugated Jews, and why the Christian New Testament is so anti-Semitic? Oh, to which he decided that he would write all kinds of slanderous things about me, and he sent out his little flying monkeys, because he's obviously got a collection of them, all of which would try to demean me. And I said, well, let's just deal with reality. The Christian New Testament blames Jews for killing their imaginary God. And it said that killing the Jews made their imaginary God so mad at the Jews that he decided to become capricious and renege on all the promises he had made to them and change all those promises to the Goy and their church. That's exactly what the Christian New Testament says. And they did it so they could rob the Jews of their inheritance. And beyond that, of course, the whole myth of Jesus is identity theft, robbing Jews of their Messiah and the Son of God. So there is no question that this is all true, that every aspect of this is verifiable and undeniable in the Christian New Testament. Oh, but they just don't want to deal with it. Well, I'm here to tell you God's dealing with it. The renewal of his covenant is with Yisrael and with Yehudah, and not with a Gentile church. End of story. No New Testament. Of course, the New Testament's a pile of shit. All it does is contradict and annul God's plans through his Torah and with his people and through his Messiah. Well, this, of course, is the best possible news for Yisrael and Yehudim. Their estrangement from Yahweh will soon be resolved. But, of course, it's devastating for Christians. The covenant formed with Abraham and Sarah, then affirmed with Yishak and Jacob, will be renewed and affirmed with their descendants, Yisrael and Yehudim. This means that Yahweh will re-engage with his people on the basis of the original, one and only Bereth covenant, as explained in Bereshith. the Genesis narrative of his Torah instructions. Therefore, we can depend upon the same 5 conditions and 5 benefits that the Genesis narrative presents. They will be upheld. And the first of these requires disassociating from all things Babel. And there is no religion in the history of religion as Babylonian as is Christianity, rife with their dying and resurrecting God, with a God having a God Son, with them having a Trinity, with steeples and with a cross. These are all Babylonian myths. As is Mary, the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven. She's Babylonian too. Even Bible comes from Babel. Same word. God is opposed to national politics, religion, social and societal traditions, and the family of man, as described throughout his Torah and prophets, and walking away from them is a prerequisite of being part of the covenant. And so you can't be a Christian because that's a religion and be part of God's family and therefore enter heaven. Since Goyim and their church have been expressly excluded and only Jews are included, Christians rip a misleading rendition of Lo Kaha Bereth Asher Karat Eth Ab Hem out of context to justify their New Testament. But it's a fool's folly down replacement theology lane. It will differ somewhat from the covenant, which, to reveal the way to the benefits of the relationship, I entered into with their fathers on the day I firmly took them by the hand and with overwhelming intent overpowered the situation. Shazak Ani Bayad. I showed an intense resolve and was inflexible in my influence over them, even overpowering them due to the urgent need for them to prevail, to bring them out of the realm of the crucibles of religious and political oppression, Eretz Mitzrayim. Relationally, they broke my covenant, although they were married, Yahweh reveals through his prophet. This is a powerful and precisely framed pronouncement. So let's contemplate the implications and conclusions. First, since Bereth family relationship has not been reestablished with the Israelites or with Judah up to this point, this promise has not been fulfilled. This promise of a reaffirmed, renewed covenant has not yet occurred. That means it's in our future. And that means the Christian New Testament cannot be the thing that has not yet happened. Therefore, there is no justification whatsoever for a New Testament, much less a New Testament that condemns everything that is presented regarding the covenant and its Torah, as well as its people. This is depicting a future event. It also nullifies the notion of replacement Jewish diatribes. So do everyone a favor and shut down the yeshivas and shut down the seminaries. In an act of desperation, as an attempt to sweep this issue undermining the foundation of their religion under the carpet, the authors of the New Testament had mythical Jesus equate his blood to wine and his body to bread, to infer an unspoken and ambiguous association with Pesach and matzah without ever stating it because, well, we don't want to talk about those things that were between the Torah, Yahweh, and his people, now do we? And this is only because without this connection, there is no justification for the counterfeit, death, or any correlation with the multitude of prophecies pertaining to the fulfillment of Pesach and matzah. And since this still did not resolve the explicit references to Dode, Yahweh, Israel, and Jews, replacement foolology was used to miscast Jesus for Dode, the Lord for Yahweh, Yehudim for the church, and Yisrael for Christians. But there was no Jesus. Dode fulfilled Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children. We are instructed never to drink blood, and the lamb's blood goes on the door frame as a sign, not in our mouths. Moreover, the bread is unyeasted, not broken. And then, of course, prophecies like this one addressing Yahweh's affinity for Yisrael and Yehudim in our future preclude the possibility of a church or of Christians replacing God's chosen people. Not then, not now, not ever. Second, the reunification of Yisrael and Yehudim with Yahweh through an affirmation of the Bereth covenant speaks of a different 3 days in time. While the doorway to life was opened, the threshold of perfection was prepared, and the adoption into God's family was facilitated by Dode during the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim at the outset of the 80th Yobel year in 33 CE. It did not bring Israelites and Yehudim together, and it did not reconcile their relationship with Yahweh, not in the least. In fact, based upon the Jewish religious reaction to what the Messiah Dode accomplished, it drove God and his people further apart. In fact, the false Messiah that the rabbis would promote through Akiba 100 years thereafter to deny the actual fulfillment by the real Messiah Dode caused the diaspora, leading to the Holocaust, and was the cause of the Romans relabeling Judea as Palestina, leading to this great atrocity that is going to certainly afflict God's people in the near future. Now, it has been my life's work to encourage Jews to come home and to embrace Yahweh, his Bereth, Mikre, Torah, and Zeroah. As a result, I realize that the family reunion being foretold in Yirmiyah 31 will not be fulfilled during the Shabuah 7 Shabbat harvest at the commencement of the time of Yisrael's troubles on May 22nd, 2026. Now, this is because the imminent harvest of prominent and mature wheats, symbolized by the 2 loaves of bread, brings the covenant family comprised of Yehudim and Goyim together with God. So the 3 days being referenced here pertain to the olive harvest on Towrah at the conclusion of year 6000 in 2033, which is year 6000 as I've stated, followed by the final gleaning of a remnant of Jews in Jerusalem on Kippurim upon Dode's return. This leads to the Sukkah celebration. Therefore, Yahweh is speaking about what will occur on the Shabbat of Towrah on trumpets, September 23rd, 2033, both the evening as the sun sets and the next morning as the sun rises, because as the sun set, we have the final Lakot of Israelites and Yehudim being taken actually to Shamayim as the final act of the Zeroah, and as the sun rises, we have the final act of Dod's Bashar, herald as the Adamah Parah, where he lays down his life to perfect this remaining mortal remnant of Yehudim who have been left behind and have been brought from all the world into Jerusalem to benefit from this sacrifice that Eliah and Yahowah are officiating. This then provides the audience for Dod's and Yahowah's magnificent homecoming on Yom Kippurim. That will occur on sunset, October 2nd, 2033, in Jerusalem. Of course, then we return to the Garden of Eden on the Shabat of October 7th, year 6000 Yah. And it is then at the conclusion of the 120th Yobel that the Bereth covenant will be renewed and reaffirmed with Yisrael and with Yehudim, just as this prophecy foretells. Third, Yahowah was not comparing the ultimate restoration of his family with the inception of the Bereth covenant formed with Abraham, culminating in 968 BCE, or 2000 Yah, or even to its confirmation on Mount Moriah that year as a harbinger of Passover. The 5 conditions articulated by Yahowah and accepted by Abraham still apply, as do the 5 benefits, and nothing new regarding them. The originals are still in place. The restoration and renewal of the covenant is being explicitly compared to the Yatzah, the exodus from Mitzrayim, the time of trouble in the crucibles of religious and political oppression, and the subsequent presentation of the Torah guidance which occurred in 1447 BCE. Yahowah is distinguishing between what he did through Moshe and what he will do to free his people from the presence of the rabbis, the Muslims, and the Christians, as well as the Marxists, who have sought to either annihilate them or replace them. Now, this distinction means that the renewal of the covenant in year 6000 Yah, alongside Dod, differs from how Yahowah interacted with the children of Yisrael alongside Moshe in 3480, or 3,480 years prior to the fulfillment of this prophecy that would have occurred in 1447 BCE. Specifically, Yahowah was Chazak. He was overpowering and inflexible, Bah Yom, on that day, because the Israelites were so badly indoctrinated and abused by the most overtly political and religious regime on earth that they were unaware of Yahowah. They knew nothing about the covenant. They were recalcitrant because they had no access to a text teaching them otherwise. Therefore, God dragged them from slavery and servitude, being dehumanized and abused, kicking and screaming. And boy, did they kick and scream. Fact is, the Hebrews became so accustomed to being demeaned, they were trauma bonded, more comfortable with being subjugated than being free. It is a psychosis that haunts them even to this day. Therefore, the fourth point that God is making is that the renewal of the covenant with Jews and Israel will not occur the same way. The exodus from Babel, from the Bible, from the confounding commingling of religion and politics associated with Babylon and the Christian Bible, during the Towrah olive harvest and Kippurim homecoming will be dissimilar to the exodus from Mitzrayim, and that the irascible and embittered malcontents will be left behind or collected in the black chariot. No one is going to be dragged into the covenant family kicking and screaming again. If you want to become among the Bakurim, the firstborn children, it will be based upon your decision to accept Yahweh's conditions. Well, the reason should be obvious. Because Jews have been oblivious, Yahweh explains it to them in the next sentence. While the former Hebrew slaves 3,500 years ago would neither read nor write, and since they had no Torah and Nabi to recite, God grabbed them by the hand and he lifted them out of harm's way. But now, Yahweh's Torah, Nabi, Mizmor, is readily available, and virtually every Jew can read God's testimony. Moreover, I have been invested the past 24 years preparing these translations for Israel, explaining what is going to transpire and when it will occur. It's all itemized in writing at YADAYAH.com. There is no excuse. Read it or reject it and live with the consequence. Your call, your consequence. As Yahweh has affirmed, almost immediately after letting go of their hands during the Yatsa Exodus, the children of Israel rebelled. Read Numbers 11. Read Numbers 12. Read Numbers 20. You need to have an example of this. Yisrael, Parar, they broke and nullified Yahweh's Bereth covenant. To the point where Yahweh said, I can't deal with you anymore. Moshe says, I give up on you. No one could tolerate you. God literally gave up on you, as did Moses. And so, as to approach the restoration of this covenant, it is now incumbent upon the Jews seeking reconciliation to initiate the process by acknowledging Yahweh and accepting the conditions of the Bereth as depicted in the Torah while celebrating the Mikra as intended. And since there isn't and wasn't a Jew on earth 24 years ago when I began to write these books explaining exactly how that should transpire, it wasn't until Yahweh chose to work through me in this regard that any of this was possible. But now it all is. And now it's incumbent upon you to choose to educate yourself so that you come to understand what God is offering and what he expects in return if you want to be part of those who live forever with him. And should you be interested, but not yet familiar with these instructions, you will find every answer you seek in the 35 volumes presented in these books behind me, freely offered at YADAYAH.com. The name says it all. Yada means to know, to be familiar with, to acknowledge, and to understand. Yahweh. I'm so desirous of getting your attention. I'm tone deaf and rhythm impaired, and yet nevertheless, I'm writing songs to elicit a response. So be forewarned, you will not be prevailed should you remain influenced by religion or politics. Remain reluctant, unaware, or uncertain. That is the message being conveyed in this prophecy. Also, let it be known, the Talmud is not the Torah. For this reason, this is the covenant, which, to enjoy the benefits of the relationship, I will cut with the house of Israel. After that, and then without hesitation, prophetically declares Yahweh, I will provide placing my Torah, my guidance and teaching within them, and integrated into their ability to make decisions. I will write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my family. Yirmiah 31:33. Wow. And it's amazing that with statements like this, that I can get pushback and denial, even abuse from Christians, when you tell them that their religion is a complete and utter farce, and that the Christian New Testament has no justification, that God himself condemns it. But that is the only rational and informed conclusion. It is impossible, ladies and gentlemen, for God to have inspired a New Testament that contradicts and annuls, even condemns, his original and only covenant and the Torah in which it is provided, to return to the Torah and then write its guidance inside of our very nature, integrating his teaching within us. You can't have annulled the Torah and then come back to it, unless your God is an unreliable, capricious nincompoop. And considering the fact that the Christian God, fits on a dead God on a stick, I think we've found the nincompoop. For this reason, this is the covenant, which to enjoy the benefits of the relationship, I will cut with the house of Yisrael, not with any God-forsaken church, not with Christians, not with Goyim, with the house of Yisrael. Read it and weep if you are religious. By the way, it doesn't say with Judaism either, does it? With the house of Yisrael after that. And then without hesitation, prophetically declares, oh, there's that name again. Oh my goodness, the name that destroys the three Abrahamic religions. The three religions that are so afraid of God's name, they won't even speak it. And if I speak it, they, whoa, go all nutsoid. Why? Because Yahweh's name destroys Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. It is outlawed in all three of those religions. It is banned from all three of those religions. It is not mentioned or included in any one of those religions. And if you do not know and include Yahweh's name, you are not with Yahweh. Yahweh does not know you, and he has nothing to do with you. This is the name to end all religions. It ain't Jesus who's coming back. It ain't Allah who claims to be a God. It isn't Hashem. All three religions crash and burn at the mention of Yahweh's name in his own voice at this time. It's just over. You can't recover. I mean, yeah, I guess you can. That's why they call it faith, because with faith, evidence and reason do not matter. So you can disregard the word of God and disregard logic and still believe. After all, that's why they call it belief. Belief is the residue of not knowing. Faith is when you don't understand. But for anybody that is informed, and I have just informed you, and is not duplicitous, there is nothing left of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam in the face of what God just said. For this reason, this is the covenant, the family-oriented relationship agreement, singular, which to enjoy the benefits of the relationship, Asher, I will cut, karat, I will create through separation, making and establishing with Be'eth Yisrael, the house and home of those who engage and endure with God after that, and without hesitation, at a later period, in a different time, Akar ha-hem, in the very last days, prophetically declares in advance, Nahum, Yahweh, I will provide, placing as a gift, Nathan, I will give and ascribe, producing, offering, and bestowing Torah ani, my Torah, my guidance, my direction, my instructions, my Torah, that which is associated with my teaching, instructions, and directions within them, ba kareb hem, inside of them, such that it is part of their inner person, part of their thought process, affecting their conscience and animating their lives, and integrated into their ability to make decisions, waleb him, and upon their inclinations and disposition, their character and thinking, their hearts and minds, I will write it. Kathab hu. I will place and inscribe it, engraving it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my family. Yirmiyah 31:33. And the first statement in this message, it was directed to Israel and Yehudim. As we progressed, the audience was reaffirmed when God spoke of your fathers being brought out of Mitzrayim. That would be Israelites, including Yehudim. Then the identity of those stated for restoration was restated as Yisrael. Therefore, the preeminent pronouncement required by Christians to justify their New Testament clearly does not apply to them. But by the same token, with the incorporation of the Torah into the lives of God's children, Talmud toters are also excluded. In fact, so are those who are political and religious, because the stated intent is to become children in Yahweh's family, where there is to be no political parties or sects. Now, should you be curious as to why Yahweh will be able to integrate his Torah, and I want to just back up a second. Do you have any idea why Yahweh went from Yehudim and Yisrael to reaffirming that with identifying the people that were brought out of Mitzrayim, which would have been the children of Yisrael, to just mentioning Yisrael and no longer mentioning Yahudah in the summation statement here? Do you know why that's the case? Because this is occurring on the day of reconciliations, Yom Kippurim. Reconciliations is plural. There's two forms of reconciliation that are commencing at this time. One is the integration of Yisrael and Yehudim back as one. They were split in two not long after Solomon. And the northern kingdom of Yisrael and the southern kingdom of Judah were enemies. And then the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes of Yisrael, were attacked by the Assyrians and hauled away into slavery. They became the lost tribes. Yehudah continued to survive, but with ongoing assaults by the Babylonians, and then the Macedonian Greeks, and then the Imperial Romans, and then the Roman Catholic Church, and on it goes, by the Ottomans, by the Muslims again, now by Europeans and the Roman Catholic Church again, and by Nazis, and now by Marxists and Muslims all over again. But were separated. God says, no, they're no longer separated now. Yisrael incorporates all 12 tribes. They're all back together. That's why that's the case. So now that we've cleaned up that detail, should you be curious as to why Yahweh, and I thought this was fascinating, and I've studied it at considerable length, why Yahweh will be able to integrate his Torah guidance into the lives of his covenant family, literally writing it inside of us at this juncture, but could not do so previously. What's the answer? Why? Why didn't Yahweh just do away with the whole Torah thing, which is as a scroll, which Jews now carry around and parade around like it's a whore? Why not just integrate it? Answer is free will. God sought to place his Torah inside of the children of Israel 3,500 years ago, it would have been against their will, just like talking directly to them was against their will. And it would have precluded anyone from being able to reject him, which is incompatible with a loving relationship. However, now that every recipient has arrived at their own discretion and chosen to be directed by the Torah, chosen to benefit from the Shabuah, Towrah harvest and the Kippurim homecoming, it is the perfect adjunct to guide us through the expansive realm of space-time and then into the 5th, 6th, and 7th dimensions. We are going to need considerable guidance as to how to make informed and appropriate choices as we gain all of this additional capability. And therefore, the Torah is being written inside of us. And it also needs to be written inside and becoming part of the lives of this mortal remnant of Yisrael, who will be there to celebrate Yom Kippurim. But be clear, for Yahweh to write his Torah inside of the lives of his people, there can be no church and there can be no New Testament. There is no rational possibility whatsoever for there to be either. And therefore, the only way for you to continue to be a Christian is to be ignorant and irrational. Now, they have faith for that. And if you're comfortable believing that which cannot be true, that is your choice. But at least you have been forewarned. Don't miss the fact that even now, the Torah, as it is being written inside of us, is a frontal assault in opposition to the absurd rabbinical argument in favor of their oral Torah, aka the Babylonian Talmud. Further to this point, since Yisrael's long-anticipated return to Yahweh culminates with the incorporation of Yahweh's written Torah, he's writing this inside of us, there is no validity whatsoever to the basis of Judaism, just as there is no credibility whatsoever to a New Testament. God's message has not changed. His people at this point have. Shub for shub. And they will need to change again to be part of the remnant enjoying this day. As a result of the restoration and integration of Yahweh, Torah into our lives, there will be a marvelous transformation, the complete elimination of religious, political, and conspiratorial jargon. You can't corrupt and misappropriate that which is now integrated into you perfectly. At this time, we will all Yada Yahowah. Now, there's still a purpose, by the way, for Yada Yahowah, even after the Torah is written inside of us. And that purpose is to explain it. It's one thing to know what God said, which is rare these days. It's another thing to understand it and be able to apply it to your life. God says, no longer will anyone impart information or teach individuals in association with an errant and outspoken world, or other individuals according to brotherly kinship, so as to say, choose of your own accord to know Yahweh, because everyone will know me, from the youngest and up to and the enduring witness of the most important and oldest, prophetically reveals Yahweh. Jeremiah 31:34. Well, this is God's plan. It's not going to change. So now that you know what is going to happen, with whom and why, it's going to occur, I hope, trust, you will be among the celebrants. There's no excuse for being otherwise. And I should be looking forward to seeing you on Shabuah, even though I know that faith is allergic to the truth and that religion dies hard. Just ask God's people. Returning now to Hosea, we find an engraved invitation from God. You should choose, because we should return to Yahowah. You should choose to go, because we should return to Yahowah. There is two words here, two verbs that need further illumination. The first is halak. You should choose to go. Of your own volition, you should walk and explore, being willingly led. It was written in the imperative mood, which means that it is stated under the auspices of second person volition, speaking of you. You should choose to go, to walk. The reason, and it's go to Yahowah, because in the covenant, the first condition of the covenant is to walk away from Babel, from religious and political corruption. So this is the antithesis of that, putting you in the right direction versus the wrong direction. And this next statement is also indicative of that, where it says you should return to Shub, because it's in your interest to turn around and change, to restore and reestablish your relationship with Yahowah, not with Hashem, not with the Lord, not with Jesus, not with Allah, not with a Christ, with Yahowah. If you're not restoring your relationship with Yahowah, if you're not walking to Yahowah, then you are walking away from him and disengaged from God. It is also interesting to note that this fulfillment of the time when the Torah will be written inside of us is on Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim is the most important mikre for Yahowah, while Chag Matzah is the most important mikre for us when we are perfected by God. That is the time we walk to God and become perfect. So by choosing to walk to God as opposed to walking away from him through religion, we are perfected. If you go through that open door to life of Passover and pursue that path to God, and you walk to him along the path of the Moed Mikre on Matzah, you would be perfected, and this would enable you to participate in Bikurim and return to Yahowah, such that you are there to participate on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations with Yahowah. Yahowah is the Almighty's proper designation, pronounced as instructed in his Torah, which he's writing inside of us. And it is based upon his Haya existence and his role in our Shalom, reconciliations, as our Eloah, God. I shared those words because they all teach us the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name. For he has torn us away for a time so that he can heal us for all time. He has thrust us aside, but he will wrap himself around us. Hosea, he provides. Hosea 6:1. That is really the message of Hosea, that Jews had become so obnoxious, so religious, so political, so antagonistic towards God, so unfaithful through their religious choices and false gods. Keep in mind that it was Jews who created Christianity and also Islam, that God said, you are no longer my children. You are no longer married to me, which would be you're no longer in the covenant. I'm divorcing you, and you are not my children. And he did say at that time that a time will come when Israel will change and return. And God says, I will return to you when you return to me. That is what this is saying. And the beauty of it is that Yahweh is not going to hold anything that his people have done in the past to antagonize him against them at this time. If you return to Yahweh, you will find him there with open arms, awaiting your arrival. Those that have been thrust aside, he will wrap himself around. Those who have been torn away will be healed for all time. It's a beautiful conclusion, is it not? It is your life, of course, and your choice, because a relationship with Yahweh is subject to free will. It cannot be imposed upon you, which means that if you want to be with God, you should prioritize reading, learning, understanding, and then responding to him. Shema, listen. Shamar, observe. Yada, know. Bien, understand. And then Shub, respond. How about that for a little Hebrew lesson in our approach to Yahweh? Those who process these Hebrew terms and their intent, reading that book that Yahweh is intending to write inside of us, observing it, responding to it, coming to know it and understand it, well, God's going to be there for you. Which, by the way, means that those who don't, he won't. The corollary is always true. Unfortunately, for most of the past 3,000 years, Jews have been halakking away from Yahweh in the wrong direction, becoming more religious and political. Boy, is it true today with progressive Marxists marching in opposition to Israel and in favor of the very Muslims that would destroy them and murder them. And you have the Haredim as nothing but religious parasites antagonizing God. 20 to 25% of Jews on either side of these extremes. And of course, that's why they were pushed away and it remained estranged. The single most repetitive theme throughout the Torah and the Psalms is that God hates religion. I had a fellow on X that with an MJoy mocked the website URL, goddamnreligion.org, and not knowing, of course, that God hates religion and that goddamn religion is a sentence. It means God separates himself from the religious. God hates and condemns religion. It's the single most repetitive theme throughout the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Now, we should be cognizant as well that Yisrael and Yehudah are not being invited into the home of Adonai. There will be no Hashem greeting anyone, or a G-D. Likewise, the Lord Jesus Christ and the Quranic Rabbi Allahi, Allaha, Allahu are nowhere to be seen. There is no mention of a Rabbi Akiba or Maimonides, a Peter or a Rabbi Paul, no Muhammad, no hint of a Talmud, Babylonian or otherwise. There's no New Testament and no Quran. This journey is through words. It travels back in time to the formation of the Bereth as it was conveyed through the Torah and forward through the fulfillment of the Moed Mikre and the revelations of the Nabi. The chosen people are called to halak, walk with Yahweh, and to shub, return to the covenant. As a vine dresser would do in a vineyard, the diseased and rotten trindles will be pruned so that the vines can be restored to health. It's time for healing, a vibrant new growth in a disease-free environment. Love and fellowship will replace anguish and infidelity. Yahweh's remedy for the consequence of religion, his means of restoring his relationship with those who abandoned him. is Pesach and Matzah, leading to Bikurim. Shabuah follows for the covenant family comprised of Yehudim and Goyim. And then for those who missed these fulfillments, the final opportunities are Towrah and Kippurim, and most especially the first evening and day of Towrah, the final gleaning and the sacrifice of the red heifer, so that a remnant of God's people are there in Jerusalem celebrating Dod's homecoming as their king, and such that we can all participate and enjoy camping out with God for 1,000 years during the celebration of Sukkah, from year 6,000 to 7,000 Yah. In each case, the first two Mikre result in the third and enable the others. And while all of that is true, this particular prophecy depicts that which will occur as the final three Moedim are fulfilled in the 7th month of the Yobel year of 6,000 Yah. I will share this next line with you, and we will pick up God's story at this place in our next edition of Qatsyr Harvest. But I wanted to share this much with you because, well, we are still celebrating here in the middle of the sea, although it is now over for God's people in Jerusalem, depending on which day, of course, they decided to celebrate the beginning of Shabuah. It's interesting this year that you could have picked, as we did, the second or the third, or the first or the second of June in this year, based upon the astronomical or the observational method of timing. So I would have no question or no concern of people celebrating Shabuah this evening and through sunset tomorrow, while we celebrated it at sunset yesterday, and through will be through sunset today, which has not yet occurred in the midst of the Caribbean Sea. But I know that Israel is 7 hours before. It's 4:49 p.m. here, so it's 11:49 in Israel, and long after the sun has set. This statement reads, through 2 days, He will choose to revive and sustain our lives. On the third day, He will establish our restoration, encouraging and raising us so that we can stand up and endure. Then we will live in His presence. I had once thought that the 2 days leading to a third would have simply been Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim. But I don't think that's the case. Well, I recognize that anyone who capitalizes upon those 2 days and celebrates them correctly, as Pesach opens the door to life and Matzah perfects us, and as Dod's Bashar body came in the second of 3 lives to fulfill Passover as the lamb, and then had his nefesh soul carry our guilt into Sheol so that we could become God's children, be enriched and empowered by Him, and become an eternal members of the covenant family, standing with Him forevermore. Yes, that's all true. However, so few people capitalized upon it. Most Jews have denied it. And this is a prophecy of a future. This is the time when Jews are finally healed. They have not been healed up to this point. There has been no embrace of God's people up to this point. They are still alienated from God. They are still political. They are still religious. So these 2 days have to be Towrah and Kippurim in year 6,000 Yah. We're dealing with the day of the herald and the day of reconciliation, Yom Towrah and Yom Kippurim. To appreciate this, you need to know that on the evening as the sun sets on Towrah, the 23rd of September, 2033, that's the final gleaning of the covenant family, and a gleaning of Israelites as it's an olive harvest. And so what God is speaking of here is not that gleaning, because that is not the time that you will have chosen to revive and sustain our lives, because those who are harvested will have made this decision based upon what Dod did in Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim in the 7 years prior to this harvest, between the Shabuah harvest and the Towrah harvest. And so we're dealing with what occurs on the Shabat of September 24th as the sun rises on Towrah, where you are being given an opportunity, if you're in this surviving mortal remnant of God's people, whether gathered by him into Jerusalem to capitalize or there in the first place, and you have finally given up on religion and politics, and you're ready and focused on the sacrifice of the Adam of Perah, this bloody red man of the earth, who is not a red heifer, but is being presented symbolically that way. And Eliah's orchestration of the sacrifice of the red heifer, where he's killed by the corporeal manifestation of Satan, and then everything thereafter is coordinated between Eliah, serving as the master of ceremony, and Yahweh, who will release the waters and ignite the flames that will purge his people of their guilt. This is the time that the adulterous woman of Israel is finally prepared to be betrothed to the returning king, to Dod. And so if you choose to be revived and have your life sustained on this time, you're a mortal remnant of Israel, you want to continue to live in God's presence and enter the millennial Shabbat in this return to Eden, then this is the time that you must choose. And you must be there then when Dod returns. That would be the second day. That's Yom Kippurim, 10 days later. An amazing time between the sacrifice of the red heifer on the 24th of September and Dod's return on the 2nd of October. Be the greatest show on earth, to be the most amazing time to be alive. Be the end of the time of Jacob's troubles and the beginning of the time of forevermore, of happily ever after. And such on the third day, which would then be on Sukkah. That is when we get to enter the Garden of Eden again, where the earth is transformed in the conditions of Garden of Eden, and our restoration is established. We are able to stand and endure in God's presence forevermore. We get to live with our God, our lives restored, and we're in his presence as he will return with Dod on Kippurim, such that we can live with him on Sukkah and forevermore. That's Hosea 6:2. And we'll return to this as we reprise this statement at the beginning of our next episode of Qatsyr Harvest. But at this point, I think I've given you a lot to think about. This has been a profoundly important teaching from God regarding his disdain for religion, and in particular, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and his great love for his covenant relationship and his Moed Mikre, in which the benefits of that relationship are delivered to his people. So I thank you for listening. I am Craig Winn, and this has been the YAHOWAH blog.